Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. If you are new, I invite you to subscribe. It really does mean the world. If you're returning, same thing applies. It's a truism either way. Either way, you're likely here for one of three reasons. Well, unless you tripped and fell on the way to a Disney vlog with better production value. But barring that, you're likely here for one of three reasons. Film and book reviews. Most of my film reviews are done with my partner in all things cinema, Chad. Our Chad and Mel movie hours are one of my favorite things in the whole wide world, and we're super proud of them. Our most recent one, which is Richard Stanley's adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's Color Out of Space, starring Nicolas Cage. I'll link it in the iCard. Check it out. It's a lot of fun. Second reason being, you are interested in finding out more about menstrual equity and how you can learn more about the politics of menstruation, more specifically the work that I've done here in the Bay Area with an organization, a nonprofit called #HappyPeriod. It's a national organization, and in my videos you can find out more about that and how you can help support the homeless and underserved menstruators in your community receive menstrual hygiene products. Third reason, and if you're here for number three, it's your lucky day, is Disney content. Disney content all day. I've got cat hair all over me, I apologize. This is the 7th video in my series that is very close to my heart, which is the Women of Walt Disney Imagineering. And I will link, of course, everything in the iCards and in the description box. I've done everything going all the way back to the OG Imagineer, Harriet Burns, to Alice Davis, Miss Dorothea Redmond, Leota Toombs the Queen, Mary Blair, the other queen. Most recently, we jumped forward in time and started exploring some of the more contemporary Imagineers with Becky Bishop. I'll link that in the iCard as well. Tonight, we are continuing that theme of more contemporary Imagineers with Kathy Rogers, who I have just had the privilege of learning about, and I am excited to share her work with you. Just taking a step back before we dive into her profile, the more contemporary Imagineers, specifically Becky Bishop, Kathy Rogers, and some of the women I have coming up next, like Peggy Ferris, Eli Erlandson, are coming to the fore thanks to a book coming out in October called The Women of Imagineering. I linked it in, or talked about it in the Becky Bishop video. I think it's called The Women of Imagineering, 12 Stories, 12 Theme Parks, 12 Women, 12 Stories, count. My God, Melissa. 12 Women, 12 Theme Parks, and Countless Stories. It's coming out in October. Sindel is equally upset as I am with the fact that even going back to the original Women of WED and Walt Disney Studios like Harriet Burns and Alice Davis, there's so little being publicized and published about them. It seems like there's a little bit of a sea change, and that's shifting, thank God. But that's why I chose to do this series. Disney is obviously very close to my heart, and women's issues, obviously, one of the pillars of my channel. So if I can marry the two and create a Women of Disney Imagineering series, well then, cheers to me and cheers to you. So without further ado, cheers. Let's get into Kathy Rogers. So Kathy Rogers has had an amazing career. I will link the articles that I have referenced in the description box, as well as a really awesome YouTube interview with her that came out a couple years back at Disneyland when they were on the verge of opening up Star Tours version 2, which we will get into. Kathy Rogers is especially interesting to me because she started off as a regular cast member. Very specifically, she started off working in the Disneyland parking lot. Now, Kathy Rogers has been with the Disney company for over 50 years at this point. She started off working in the Disneyland parking lot. I mean, to go from that to the head of show production, which is her title at Disney Imagineering, is just a testament to how hard she's worked and to the rich history that really needs to be disseminated. So hopefully this will give you guys something to learn more about, sink your teeth into, and do your own research. With that being said, always feel free to comment below if you know something that I don't, because again, it's very important to me that information about these women's histories, not only within the Walt Disney Company, but as women that have contributed to the history of Americana, to art in America, and just American history is extremely important. But anyways, this woman started off working in the Disneyland parking lot, and she worked, I don't know if she worked in the parking lot for 10 years. You know, the people that tell you where to park. I always wanted to do that. You know, this moment right here, this moment, this is Kathy Rogers and me in my dreams. Just, that was Kathy Rogers. So she worked in lower level Disneyland roles for the better part of a decade. At this point, I believe simultaneously she is attending and graduating Cal State Long Beach. She got her degrees in child and family development and home economics. She jokes in one of the interviews that neither of those degrees served her in any way whilst working with the Walt Disney Company. But she went on in the early 80s to become a project coordinator for the new Fantasyland at Disneyland when they did a renovation of said land. And after that, she was actually hired by WED, and that led to her becoming the Imagineer and the head of show production that she is today. And of course, ultimately to her having worked for the company for 50 years. There's two major projects that I was able to find out about that she's had her hands on and really had a huge part in producing and bringing to fruition. One of which is Star Tours 2.0, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit more detail, and also the Hall of Presidents at Disneyland and Walt Disney World. I'm going to start off with Star Tours. So if you're not familiar with Star Tours, I don't know, fix your life. If you're not familiar with Star Tours, it's the OG Star Wars attraction at Disneyland. That's where it first appeared, and then it made its way into Walt Disney World, and I believe into Hong Kong Disneyland is where the third one is. Tokyo Disneyland. So the simulator was, the attraction itself was a huge leap forward for technology, for theme park technology, and especially for the Walt Disney Company when it first arrived on the scenes. Not only technologically was it a marvel, but because it was developed with George Lucas and Lucasfilm, it was the inception of the relationship that would lead to what we now have in Disneyland and Walt Disney World, Galaxy's Edge. And what's interesting is that she got to work with George Lucas directly in developing Star Tours 2.0. What's Star Tours 2.0? So the attraction had been out for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, I'm not exactly sure. And when the prequels came out in 1999, they decided to incorporate some of the storylines of The Phantom Menace into the attraction, and also leave room, knowing that there was going to be 2 more films in that trilogy, leave room in the attraction for additional stories to be built in as the movies were released. So Star Tours 2.0 included The Phantom Menace, and as we know it today, includes footage from the original trilogy, the prequels, from the sequels, and also Galaxy's Edge. But this was kind of the second iteration of the ride, and she worked hand in hand with George Lucas to produce the second iteration. Tony Baxter, if you don't know who Tony Baxter is one of my favorite Disney Imagineers for a plethora of reasons. And if you've had the opportunity to watch the Imagineering story documentary on Disney Plus, you know who I'm talking about because he's featured in every episode. He's had his hands on so many things domestically and internationally, but the reason why he's close to my heart is because he developed, He incepted, conceptualized, developed, designed, and manifested the original, not the pile of crap it is today, but the original Journey into Imagination. The Dreamfinder is his idea. Figment, Dreamfinder, Journey into Imagination, beautiful glass pyramid. That's Tony Baxter. Okay, so Tony Baxter. That's why Mama loves Tony Baxter. But Tony Baxter also was responsible for helping to produce the original Star Tours. So she got to work not only with George Lucas, but with Tony Baxter in Star Wars 2.0. And I will, again, link the YouTube interview with her for the press event for that, I guess for the premiere in the comments. She also helped to produce over 50 different combinations of storytelling and or iterations, if you will, for the Star Tours simulator. So such that every time you get on the ride, it has incredible rewritability. It still does to this day. But we're talking almost 15 years ago that Star Tours 2.0 came about. And at that point, to have 50 iterations of the simulator storyline is pretty impressive. And she had designed and produced the storytelling along with George Lucas of that ride, such that it could, like we talked about, leave room. It could continue to evolve. It left room for additional stories to be worked into the baseline framework of the ride, which is you're literally at a starport, you're boarding the Star Speeder 1000, and you're being jettisoned into an adventure. She was also lucky and blessed enough to work with Bill Ross, who was John Williams' arranger on all of the Star Wars franchise films. So if you're not familiar with John Williams, he scored all of the Star Wars films, and he works with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg almost exclusively. But she got to work with Bill Ross, his head arranger, to create an original score for Star Tours 2.0. And she went a step further. She talks a lot in the interview about the importance of storytelling, which is not only so evident when you are a Disney fan and you ride certain attractions, even OG attractions, but it's really evident when you ride Star Tours, because now that we have Galaxy's Edge and we have all of this stuff that's just like on another level, Star Tours still holds up. Star Tours is still amazing. I could do without some of the prequel nonsense, but you know, who couldn't? But she was very, very adamant about storytelling, about narrative, rewritability, and she wanted to even write in the narrative, like I had just mentioned, about the premise for the ride. Like, why are you even on this simulator? Why is Rex, who's now in retirement and is, moonlighting as a DJ at Oga's Cantina, and now I think C-3PO is back as the pilot, but Rex used to be the pilot of the Star Speeder 1000, don't want to get it wrong. She wanted to tell the story of, like, set the tone for, like, why are you here? And again, the premise of you boarding as a tourist this Star Speeder 1000 to go on an adventure or to visit an otherworldly or an outer world planet, I should say, was completely her idea, and we owe all of the kind of tone and feel of that you see, especially in the queue of Star Tours, to Miss Kathy Rogers. So pretty amazing to have that much of a hand on such a prolific ride, and not only such a prolific ride that still holds up today in 2020, but one that preceded all of the gimmicks of Galaxy's Edge, not to take anything away from it, but something that still holds up, and also something that we have to remember. Star Tours was really like the first marriage of the Walt Disney Company and Lucasfilm. And without that ride, we probably wouldn't have what we have today. So her having been part of that, I can only imagine. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and in the interview, which is super cute, They ask her what are her, some of her favorite parts of Star Tours, and she is particularly a fan of the Stormtrooper launch sequence. She likes the Hoth and Naboo sequences as well. We're going to get into her second big project, which is Hall of Presidents, but one of the things that she also had a hand in, which I wasn't able to find any information on in any detail, so if you know more about it, please comment below. She got to work directly with Jim Henson on the design and conceptualization and production of Muppets 3D at MGM Studios. It was MGM Studios at the time. I will refer to it as MGM Studios until I die, but it, of course, is Disney's Hollywood Studios. She worked with Jim Henson to produce Muppet 3D Vision, and nothing more is written about it. Like, what? Anyways, she also worked with Johnny Depp when he guest starred on the Pirates of the Caribbean, I guess after like Pirates of the Caribbean part like 12,000 came out. So cool side note, but she worked with Jim Henson, and like that was just like a sidebar. That was just like a footnote in the article that I was reading. I was just like, what is going on? This book that's coming out in October had better come correct with some real deep dives into these women's bodies of work, because I think I'm doing a pretty good job and I'm scratching the surface. So this is why I drink. So let's talk about Hall of Presidents. So if you've not had the opportunity to visit Disneyland or Disney World, the Hall of Presidents is probably the attraction that nobody wants to go on. You've been on it once and you're like, I get it. Politics aside, but not aside, I'm definitely not interested in going on it for certain reasons, but then I'm also very intrigued because I have yet to see our current president's animatronic, and I really, really want to. So anyways, Hall of Presidents is the attraction but maybe you don't love. But it's a marvel of Imagineering. It's a marvel of modern technology. As we know, or maybe we don't know, but they do talk about it in some detail on the Imagineering story. The auto animatronics that are the kind of, I don't want to say the foundation of, no, I'll go ahead and say it. Auto animatronics and auto animatronic technology is one of the pillars, let's go with that, of WED and Imagineering and Walt Disney theme parks. And that technology has not only led to amazing innovations for the Walt Disney Company, but has set a precedent for animatronics outside of the Walt Disney Company. You look at stuff that Alice Davis did with the Tiki Birds. You look at Pirates of the Caribbean, and of course the Hall of Presidents. Walt Disney, WED specifically, It's a Small World, Mary Blair, the World's Fair. We're going back to 64 here with the technology. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, which was the predecessor of the Hall of Presidents. That animatronic of Abraham Lincoln set a bar for what could be done. And the Hall of Presidents is something that next time I'm able to visit the parks, when the apocalypse is over, is something I'm going to make a point to visit, both in Disneyland and in Orlando, because I haven't been to Hall of Presidents since before Obama was elected. Politics aside, it's a marvel of engineering, it's a marvel of technology, and it's just a testament to Walt Disney's legacy and the Walt Disney Company's legacy, and Imagineers like Kathy Rogers' legacy. So now that ramble and rant is over, what happened with her role in Hall of Presidents was the attraction had already been in place in Disneyland for many years. Of course, again, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, which is only at Disneyland, and is still there, set the precedent for this attraction. And what happened was she was brought on board in like 2004, 2005, because they knew we had an election coming up and they would have to develop a new auto animatronic for whomever, would be the next president of the United States. What's so interesting about the work that she did to produce the Hall of Presidents for President Obama is she had no idea who would win the election. So she developed scripts and narratives and storytelling around whomever could possibly have filled that role. And one of the things that she spoke to was she wanted the show to have new life, quote unquote. She wanted to make sure that from the beginning with George Washington all the way up into the new president, which of course we know inevitably was Obama, she wanted to make sure that there was some cohesion to the narrative and that things came full circle. So one of the things that she's responsible for, in addition to writing this script this storyline rather, that would hold space for whomever would be the new president, is she for the first time wrote a script for George Washington, whose animatronic had never spoken before this point in time. So we're talking maybe like 2006. So the engineers obviously had to rework the George Washington animatronic, but she's responsible for having written the narrative and storyline for that. They also wanted to celebrate Abraham Lincoln, as he was obviously their first animatronic, and wrote the narrative for him giving the Gettysburg Address in the attraction. So also Abraham Lincoln, outside of Hall of Presidents, would speak in Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, but it's because of her that he delivers the Gettysburg Address in the Hall of Presidents attraction. She also helped work with the engineers to digitize the entire attraction, from the lighting to the projection to the sound. They implemented LED lighting, more control of, the digitization of the control boards, I don't know what you call them, to give the engineers more control over the movements of the animatronics. And she had a hand in all of this. She wanted to very specifically, quote unquote, humanize the presidents. So all of this was Kathy Rogers doing. She began the project in conceptualizing the project, in 04, 05, but the realization of the project obviously in 2006. And what's so interesting about the Obama animatronic, and one of the reasons why I need to make a point to have a couple cocktails and go next time, is they completely reworked the way that they skinned the auto animatronics with Obama. They did, like I said, they digitized the projection mapping, they digitized the entire production, but they integrated projection mapping. But one of the greatest things that they accomplished with Obama is the skin. You can really see the detail on his skin, and that set the precedent for the Trump animatronic and obviously everything that will come moving forward. So she talks about how she had been part of the group that wanted to and formally invited President Obama, once he was president-elect, to the attraction to see his auto animatronic. He never got the opportunity to go, obviously. Maybe he's been since, I don't know. But she is responsible for out of these three are some of my favorite attractions, but she's responsible, I would argue, for three of the most important attractions. You have the Hall of Presidents, which, as much as it sucks to sit through, is still important. It's still a marvel of technology. It's still a marvel of engineering and storytelling. It's an important attraction. She had her hands on Star Tours, which, again, without Star Tours, we wouldn't have Galaxy's Edge. We wouldn't have Walt Disney probably owning Lucasfilm. So, we won't even go there. But she was responsible for producing Muppet's 3D Vision. You want to talk about a LinkedIn profile to get me excited? This is it. 50 years with the company, started out working in the parking lot, doing this to cars, and then she's writing narratives for our presidents. She's producing intergalactic storylines. She's working with Jim Henson, George Lucas. Like, I don't know what more we could ask. So I hope that you enjoyed this little bit of a entree into Kathy Rogers' profile. I hope I did her some justice. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the new book has to say. Hopefully it will go into more detail about her work with Jim Henson, because I'm super excited to learn about that. But yeah, I hope this again did her some justice and you enjoyed the video and spending some time with me, repping Horizons as always. Yeah, with that being said, I am super excited about what's coming next, which is Peggy Ferris, Eli Erlandson, and Julie Svensson. So please subscribe again, it really does mean the world. Like and subscribe. As always, please comment below if you know about these women and just any factoids, please share them. Give the video a thumbs up if you dig it, and you know, share it. Why not? It helps me. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you on the other side. Cheers.